All right, so we continue looking at Moses this morning. I want to look at the next part of chapter 2. And we talk a lot in the church about us living in the world and not being of the world, not being a part of the world. And one of the hardest things I think for us as Christians is that balance. Especially not just Christians, but as American Christians, because our society has been so Christian friendly for so long that we just kind of assume things, right? I mean, I can remember growing up and listening to a Southern gospel group singing, and I just naturally assumed they were Southern Baptist. Or you listen to a preacher preach and you're just like, oh, he's Southern Baptist. We just make those assumptions that we live in a Christian friendly world and everything is good because we are good people, and so no one will persecute us, no one will try to abuse us. All of those assumptions, well, we are living in a time now, I think, where those assumptions are really going to be started to be proven wrong. And we're going to say that the world is not as friendly to us as Christians as we have grown up thinking. And a good example, I think, of that is found here in Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 through 15. So, just to recap where we are in the story of Moses, Pharaoh had come on board, did not know Joseph, didn't remember the stories of Joseph, was not kind at all to the Hebrews, realized that the Hebrews are becoming more and more numerous. And so what happens then is he's afraid there's going to be more Hebrews than there are Egyptians, and the Hebrews are going to take over. So he has to start thinking about, what do I have to do to keep Egyptian culture safe? And one of the things that he comes up with is any Hebrew child that's born, we're going to have them executed. We're going to have them killed. Well, Moses' mom hid Moses for as long as she could, and we remember the story from last week, put him in the basket. Pharaoh's daughter found him and adopted him and raised him as her own. So now we find in verse 11 that Moses is an adult. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. So he goes out and he's watching these Hebrews live life as a slave. Now Moses is different, isn't he? I mean, he's a Hebrew, but he wasn't raised as a Hebrew. He was raised as an Egyptian. He was raised inside Pharaoh's household. He was royalty, if you will. My guess is the relationship between Pharaoh and his daughter may not be as close as what we would think of. Pharaoh probably had a whole bunch of kids. It's kind of like when Chris and I were in China and we visited the Forbidden City. We saw all the buildings on either side of the emperor's household that were just for his concubines and all of his children that he would have had. And so it's probably much like that in the Egyptian society, but we do know that this is Pharaoh's daughter, and so there would be some relationship there. Moses would have been privileged. He would have had education that the rest of the Hebrews would not have had. His life would have been much easier. He had had nicer clothes, better food, better living conditions. Everything would have been much better. So he goes out one day and he's watching all of his family members, these Hebrews, laboring, slaving away. And he says then here, the end of verse 11, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people, glancing this way and that and seeing no one. I mean, very vivid, isn't it? There's nobody here. What did he do? He killed the Egyptian and he hid him in the sand. Well, there's a lot of debate in life, in the church, about self-defense. But we don't find anything, Moses isn't assuming anything's wrong with him defending this Hebrew who is being beaten by this Egyptian. But he hides the Egyptian in the sand. Killed the Egyptian, hid him in the sand. Verse 13, the next day he went out and he saw two Hebrews fighting. And he asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? So Moses is just having trouble understanding You know, this is a society and you guys are all being treated as slaves. You're living as slaves. You would think that you would be smart enough to band together. But instead, you're fighting each other. Why are you hitting each other? Why are you guys fighting? The man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Now Moses has a problem. So let's stop and just evaluate the first sentence that this guy tells, the first question this guy asks Moses. Who made you ruler and judge over us? Well, at this point, no one. Moses is just in a privileged position. Now, do you think there's some jealousy from these other Hebrews? Moses was out watching the Hebrews. He wasn't out working with the Hebrews. He was just watching. And I'm thinking that they would have been able to look at him and tell that he is not Egyptian. He is a Hebrew just like us. So he says, who made you the ruler? Who made you the boss? You going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian? Moses gets scared. Moses was afraid and thought, what I did must have become known. And then we get to verse 15. This is where we're going to camp out. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. What a life Moses has lived up to this point. Probably in his late 30s, somewhere around 40. He has lived a life of privilege. He's had everything he's ever wanted. His life has not been hard, not full of hard labor. He knew the Egyptians, ran in those upper class society events when he was one of the crowd. He would have been the guy they would have invited to go golfing, or in this case, maybe cruising up and down the Nile. He was friends with these people. He was high society. He would have known Pharaoh, would have had opportunity to go talk to Pharaoh. Now, at this point, very well may not be his grandfather, probably more so an uncle, but he would have known him. He would have spoke the same language, would have had the same educational background, would have known all of those things. Pharaoh heard that Moses killed an Egyptian. He tried to kill him. And Moses ran away. Guys, we can spend, and today's not complicated. I wish it were. But we spend so much of our time trying to get the world to like us, never realizing that you and I are a disposable commodity to the world. The world will use us for what they can get from us, and when it is gone, they are done with us. Why then would you waste all of your time trying to be friends with the world? It doesn't make sense, does it? I can remember being a little kid. My brother's 11 years older than me, and I can remember him and my dad arguing all the time because Tim had a truck, Tim had a job, Tim had gas money, and he had friends who did not have a job, they did not have a truck, and they did not have gas money. So who do you think foot the bill? My brother. And just as clear as anything, I can hear my dad telling my brother, those friends are a dime a dozen. And when there's nothing left for them to get from you, Tim, you'll never see them again. No, Dad, that's not true. Dad, that's not true. 1984, September 1984, Tim had a car wreck, spent nearly the next 2 years in a hospital. Out of all of his friends, and I'm not exaggerating, out of all of his friends, do you know how many ever came to see Tim after he got out of the hospital? One friend. All that time, all that money that Tim had invested in these friends, none of them but one ever came to see him. And he only came once or twice. Why? Well, Tim couldn't go do the same things that he used to do anymore. He didn't have the same thoughts that he used to have. But all those friends were gone. Guys, that's the way it is with us in the world. The world enjoys having Christians around, and the reason why the world enjoys having Christians around is because you and I are pretty affable folks. I mean, if we're truly living according to God's Word, you and I ought to be pretty easy to get along with. Because we're not going to take wrongs against us into account. We're going to forgive folks when they mistreat us, right? That's what Scripture teaches us to do. But guys, when the world's done with us, the world's done with us. And it should come to no surprise. Moses grew up in this family. This would have been his uncle. He would have known him. They would have eaten together. They would have hung out together. And the moment that Moses defended one of the Hebrews, Pharaoh said, I'm going to kill you. I can't imagine what Moses must have been thinking. He just goes to a well and he sits down. Now, we've probably had that emotional condition before ourselves, haven't we? Where you're just at a loss. Where all you can do is sit down. I don't know how to think. I don't know how to feel about this. I don't know what's going on. I'm just sitting here trying to figure everything out. Guys, that's where Moses was at. Why are we talking about this today? Because when it happens to us, when it happens to you, I don't want you to have to stop then and spend time thinking about it. I want you to have already processed it and know that this is what's going to happen. So what do? Do we become reclusive? No. Do we pull ourselves out of the world? Absolutely not, because that's not what God's called us to do. God's called us to live in the world. Had God wanted us to be out of the world, He would have saved us and taken us to heaven immediately. I just don't want you to be surprised when it happens. When the world looks at us and says, we've had enough. I don't want to hear it anymore. Don't talk about Jesus anymore. Don't talk about God anymore. Don't talk about the golden rule anymore. Leave us alone. Don't be surprised. When they throw you in jail, don't be surprised. The world is not your friend. Even though you and I live right here in Malvern, Arkansas, the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, guys, the world's not our friend. The world's never been our friend. And the world will never be our friend. You say, well, I don't know. It's been pretty easy to get along. Guys, they killed Jesus Christ. Heard a guy in Walmart 2 days ago, the little cashier clerk, I think she'd only worked there 2 hours when I got in line. But anyway, she had made a mistake with him, and he looked at her and he said, everybody makes mistakes. And he stopped and he said, well, there was that one guy who was perfect. And he didn't finish it. Because when I say there's only been one perfect one, I always say, and we killed him. Guys, that's our place in life. Jesus teaches us that if they did that to him, why would we expect better? He truly was perfect, and they killed him. So we have to ask ourselves this question that we're spending the entire 2016 asking: do we want to be winners in the sight of God or in the sight of man? Because we can spend all of our time trying to please man, and guys, it's not worth it. Because it won't work. We've got the story in the New Testament of the prodigal son. The prodigal son goes to his dad and he says, I want all of my inheritance. And the dad gives it to him. And what's the son do? He goes off to a far land. And there he spends everything he has, throwing wild, lavish parties, got all the friends in the world, and then he is broke. And how many of those friends took him in? None of them. My guess is that all of us have been on both sides of that. All of us have been the person that people have walked away from, and probably all of us have been on the side where we walked away from someone else. So we all understand what I'm talking about. Guys, that's the way the world views us. There's not a politician that cares about us as Christians. The United States Constitution was not written for us as Christians. You say, well, hang on, whoa. Guys, that was a man-made document. This was written for us. This is what we live our life by. We don't live our life or put our faith in anything that any other man would do, because, guys, it will all fail. It will all fall short. Nothing that exists out there will save your soul. Jesus Christ alone. Him alone, that's it. So, you think about old Moses. Can't imagine what his life was like in that moment. He knew that he did something. I mean, he killed that Egyptian because he was beating a Hebrew. And he hit him in the sand. And then Pharaoh tried to kill him. We'll spend some time talking about it in a couple of weeks. This is all part of God's plan, isn't it? Had Pharaoh not come after Moses, Moses would have never gone to the wilderness. Moses is going to spend the next 40 years of his life figuring out the wilderness. Why? Because God's got a calling for Moses. God's going to call Moses to go back to Egypt and take all of those Hebrews. I mean, I would hope, this is just me being a smart aleck, I would hope that Moses would have found that one Hebrew after 40 years and said, oh, by the way, that was God. God appointed me over you. Now shut your mouth, get in line, we're going to start walking. Guys, that's the way the world is. And that's the way God works. Sometimes our darkest, most difficult days are there because God ordained them to be there. Because God uses that to drive us where He wants us. We could all step down and stop and look back on our lives, and I'm a big fan of self-reflection and remembering where we've come from. But every one of us can look back in life and remember those times that when we were going through them, they were horrible. And years later, we look back at those times differently, don't we? And we'll say, you know what, had I not gone through that, I wouldn't be here. And if I wasn't here, this is what I would miss out on. Guys, God's smarter than we are. It was God who ordained Pharaoh to have all the Hebrew boys killed. It was God who gave Moses' mom the wisdom to hide him and put him in a basket. It was God who ordained that moment in time for Pharaoh's daughter to go down to the river to take a bath, where she found Moses, and she adopted Moses, and she raised Moses. God has ordained every step of Moses' life to put him exactly where He wants him to be. The Apostle Paul says it like this: in everything give thanks. How can you give thanks in everything? Because in everything God is at work. God's at work in everything. Nothing happens by chance. But God's in control of our lives. God's in control of our future. And God has a plan for you. He has a plan for me. And it's just my job to get in line with God. Just get in line with God and follow after God. Because my challenge to you today is, don't worry about trying to win over the world. Don't be a winner in the sight of the world. Be a winner in the sight of God. That's what matters. That's what counts. You say, well, what's the difference? You guys can help me out. What do you think the world sees as a winner? What's winning to the world? So I say money. Money. It's a good one. Power. Prestige. Status. Success. Yeah. Want our name on a building somewhere. Well, that's how the world views winning. How does God view winning? Tradition tells us that Elijah was stuffed inside a hollow log and cut in half. See a winner? Absolutely. Tradition tells us that Thomas went to India to preach the gospel, and they put him in a pot and boiled him alive. Is that a winner? Yeah. The Apostle Peter, crucified upside down. Is that a winner? Guys, these are winners. These are the people that you and I want to emulate. And you don't ever stop to think, the Apostle Paul, he didn't get his name on a billboard. He didn't get his own talk show. He didn't get his own book deal. He got executed. Having done nothing wrong, he was executed. He was executed because he wanted a face-to-face visit with Caesar. Wow. He was a winner. He was a winner. Somewhere along the way, we started measuring success in the church the same way the world measures success. We talk about it all the time. I still struggle with it from time to time. Our church building doesn't look like a church building, does it? It looks like an old Sears building. Why? Because it's an old Sears building. Our food pantry back there looks like an old laundromat. Why? It's an old laundromat. You realize in the first century they were finding Christians and executing them. They most certainly would not have put columns on the front of any building they were meeting at. But somewhere along the way we decided success in the church needed to look like success in the world. Educationally, when you were growing up, some of you when you were kids, if you'd have known a preacher who had a doctorate, I would almost bet that his doctorate would have been a THD, a doctorate of theology. Today, guess what you can't get? You can't get a THD. And the reason why you can't get a THD now is because the world doesn't really recognize the THD. So what do professors get today in the Christian world? They get a PhD, just like the world. Because everything we do, we're just trying to emulate the world, emulate the world, emulate the world. We're picking the wrong side. So guys, I want us to start examining our own lives and say, who am I trying to please? Am I trying to please the world or am I trying to please God? Do I want to be a winner in the sight of man or a winner in the sight of God? Because you can't be both. You can't be both. I'm convinced of that. Because the world looks at Christians and they just don't understand us. Because we think differently and we act differently because we are different. So guys, be different and please God. Okay? Let's pray.